talk with all of you about opening up about mental health. It's a great way for us to close out Mental Health Awareness Month and hopefully keep the conversation going through the whole year. As Kai said, my name is Jamie. I am a counseling and educational psychologist. I'm really focused on bringing these mental health conversations out of counseling and into the world, and really helping everyone to practice and build the skills that we need to have strong mental health and really thrive and achieve our goals. So in this session today, we are going to talk about what it means to open up about mental health. We will talk about why it is important. And then we'll get into some of the procedural pieces of it, of how to open up, how we can respond, and then resources that are available, as well as caring for yourself and your own mental health. So let's dive in here. I'm going to begin with a question. I want to hear from you in the chat. What does it mean to open up about mental health? This is not a trick question. I genuinely want to know what you think of when I say open up about mental health. Is there an image that comes to mind? Is it a feeling you have? Maybe it's a phrase. Share with me in the chat what comes to mind when I say open up about mental health. Great. I see discuss it without bias or judgment. That is great. That's a great opening. Excellent. Others, thoughts, what you think of when I say open up about mental health. Being honest with oneself. Yes, absolutely. I think it starts with ourselves, right? Before we can share with others and really be honest about our experience, we really have to acknowledge that ourselves. Great. Thanks for sharing that. If you haven't had a chance to share, please go ahead. Keep those coming in. I see creating a safe environment so that folks can share about mental health challenges. Yes, absolutely. Those responses really, I think, capture it well. The question that some of you may be having or may have noticed is that the conversation about mental health is changing, and it's different today than it was 10, 20, 30 years ago. People tend to be more open to sharing and talking about mental health, but again, not necessarily everyone is changing in terms of having that conversation or ready to have that conversation. It can really depend on someone's personal experience with mental health or a mental health issue, particularly if they have a coworker, a friend, or a family member who's experienced one or they've had one themselves. They may have varying opinions and thoughts about sharing that and having the conversation with others. We do tend to see in the workplace that individuals who identify as part of the Gen Z or millennial generation tend to be more comfortable opening up, which I think is a really great thing. The stigmas across generations are changing, and there is less stigma about mental health among younger generations, which I think is a really great thing. Now, of course, just because someone identifies as, say, a millennial or a Gen Zer does not necessarily mean that they're open to having these conversations. There are different norms across cultures, among different ethnic groups and genders about what is okay and not okay to talk about when it comes to mental health. This is really important to keep in mind, especially if you're working for a global organization or if you're working within a diverse organization, is that not everyone is necessarily going to be open about talking about mental health. Yet I think it's really important that we create a space where it is okay to talk about mental health. And I think it's important, of course, that we talk about mental health because mental health issues happen. So we have some statistics here from the Substance Abuse and Mental Health Services Administration 2023 report. And I want to draw your attention to a couple key statistics here. First, 21% of adults in the US are experiencing at least one mental illness in any given year. 21% is a lot of us. If we think about that another way, it's roughly 1 in 5 of us. And 55% of adults with a mental illness have not received any treatment. So that is another startling statistic. If we are not open to talking about mental health, people are not aware that there are resources and support, or they do not know how to get to those resources and support, or they may be stigmatized. So it's really important that we really open up and have this conversation. We'll also talk about suicide, that fourth bullet point down. Almost 5% of adults in the US have considered suicide. So it's important that we really talk about that as well. Here are some of the common issues you might encounter when you are opening up and talking about mental health issues, or these might be things that you've already seen in the workplace. So, for example, anxiety and depression tend to be some of the more common mental health issues, as well as gambling issues, domestic violence, substance use, self-harm, suicide ideation, and suicide. And that's quite a list. The important thing here is that you're aware of what are the signs and symptoms. You learn more about these mental health issues, as well as the road to recovery, and to know that treatment is absolutely possible and recovery is possible with these mental health issues. So I'm curious to hear from you. Have you seen these issues show up in the workplace? So again, about 21% of Americans experience a mental health issue in any given year. So share with me in the chat. Yes, no, I'm not sure. Any of those responses is great to see. Have you seen these show up in the workplace? I'm curious if you have encountered any. I see a yes right away. Okay, definitely. Yes. Good. Yeah, they again, 1 in 5, right? So even if we may not necessarily see them, they are likely there, kind of hiding underneath the surface. Not sure. Yes, great. Well, I'm glad you're here so you can learn more about it and potentially help people and get them connected to resources. Great. Thanks for sharing. So there are benefits to opening up the culture and having conversations about mental health. One of the greatest benefits is destigmatizing mental health. There are many myths and stereotypes that we have about mental health. And so because they can be stigmatized, people can feel reluctant to come forward and share their experience or ask for help. So when we open up the culture, we help to really destigmatize these conversations. We can help to really push back on those myths and stereotypes and uncover the real facts and the truth about mental health and mental illnesses. When we open up the culture, we can be part of the solution. We can be proactive in recognizing that people need support and really connecting them to support and resources and creating a more supportive environment as they learn to cope with mental health issues, and in some cases, recover from them as well. Of course, there are challenges. There are always challenges, right? No road is ever an easy one. One of the greatest challenges in opening up and talking about mental health is visibility. Some individuals who have a mental health issue can be really good at what we call masking, where they hide the symptoms of their mental health issue. And so it can be difficult to even recognize that someone is experiencing a mental health issue. By learning more about mental health issues and talking about it, we can start to see more of those symptoms. Many individuals will be reluctant to talk about a mental health issue because they may be concerned that their performance has been affected, or they might be concerned that others will think their performance has been affected because of a mental health issue. And because our performance is certainly tied to our jobs, which ties to our finances, this can feel quite risky for many individuals to come forward and really talk about mental health issues. Ego can also be a concern for many. We oftentimes have this image, right? We have our own personal brand that we are presenting to others. And because of the myths, because of the stereotypes about mental illness, people may be reluctant to come forward because it may kind of tarnish their brand. They may be worried that people will think that they're weak or that they're not capable. And there certainly is still that stigma. So many people may be reluctant to come forward because of how it may impact how they appear in the workplace. And finally, cost is certainly a challenge. When we look at treatment for mental health issues, in many cases, treatment is readily available. And in some situations, particularly if we look at substance use and inpatient substance use treatment, some of those treatment centers can be very expensive. So in some cases, cost can be a barrier or a challenge when it comes to really addressing mental health. So let's talk about kind of how we can open up and how we can really talk about mental health. First, if you are experiencing a mental health issue and you would like to share your experience and share in order to get some help and support, there's a couple ways you can do this. Regardless of how you do it, though, you want to begin by verifying privacy. And this may seem like, oh, of course, privacy, right? But it can be helpful to really plan out the conversation in advance to make sure that you and your leader, your team member, whoever you're going to be talking with, that you have time to sit down and really have a private conversation where you will not be overheard and also where you will not be rushed and you really do have time to have this conversation. And then it's also important to ask the other person to keep what you share confidential, to keep it just between the two of you. If they feel they do need to share this information, in that case, ask them to let you know in advance, to let you know who they plan to share the information with and their purpose in sharing it. So it is a great thing to ask for that confidentiality in a conversation like this. And then when you open up, you don't have to share your diagnosis. You don't have to share anything really specific about your mental health issue. You can simply share the impact it is having on you in the workplace. So for example, to say something like, lately I've been struggling with my mental health and I've been missing work more often. You may have noticed, right? Or you can say something like, I've been struggling lately and I feel like I'm making more mistakes in my work, right? So you don't have to give a lot of specific information about your mental health issue, your symptoms, but really just to show how it is impacting you in the work environment. I encourage you to really speak clearly and be honest about this. That came up in the chat earlier, so that you can really get the support and the resources you need. After sharing how your mental health issue is impacting you in the workplace, ask for what you need. If you have ideas for what would be helpful, perhaps it is time off, perhaps it is having extra lead time to double check your work or having someone else double check your work. Ask clearly for what you need. And if you are not sure what you need, that's okay. You can say, I need help figuring this out, and then invite in the other person to do some brainstorming to help you figure out what would be helpful for you as you move forward. If you are on the receiving end of this conversation, there are a few things to keep in mind. First, we want to make sure we are really listening carefully and that we are listening with compassion and empathy. So with empathy, we're trying to stand in the other person's shoes and really consider what that person might be experiencing and feeling as they come forward and have this conversation with you. It's important that you think about how they might be feeling shame because of the stigma we have about mental health, that they might be feeling some fear. They might even be feeling some guilt about their mental health issue. So it's important as you're really listening to think about how they might really be feeling as they disclose this with you. It can also be helpful to really acknowledge the courage that they have in coming forward and sharing this with you. So to say something like, thank you for trusting me. Thank you for having the courage to come forward and talk with me about this. That can be a really great way to acknowledge what you have heard. And then as you start to talk with a person more, we need to be mindful of our words. So we want to steer clear of giving advice. We don't want to tell the other person what to do, because even if we try to stand in their shoes and be empathic, we still don't know exactly what it is like to be that person and everything they have going on. So we want to steer clear of telling them what to do. Instead, we can ask the question, how can I help? Really ask them what they think would be helpful in this situation. If they don't have ideas, if they say, I don't know, I just need some help, Well, here you can give some suggestions, and you can start out with, well, would it be helpful if, right? And just throw out some ideas, brainstorming with them on what you think could be helpful. It's also okay to say, let me check with HR on this. Let them know that you plan to check in with HR and you'll circle back around with them in an hour or a day with some ideas about how you can offer them some support and help. And again, it's an offer. It's not telling them what to do per se. We also want to be careful not to assume that one thing or another is something they should do or it would be most helpful for them. So we might say, oh, I'm going to take them off this series of meetings, or I'm going to remove them from this project and put them on maybe a less impactful project. Well, that can be perceived in a multitude of ways and in some ways that were not intended. So make sure that you always ask before you make changes and that they are really part of coming together and problem solving and coming up with a way to be supportive for them. And then it can also be really helpful to learn more about the issue, to learn more about the symptoms, learn more about treatment and recovery, and what that can look like. So doing a little homework can be helpful here too. Now, it's possible you suspect that someone you work with or someone you know is experiencing a mental health issue and they have not offered up that information. So you may want to ask them about it. So again, you want to find a private space where you have time to really listen carefully and you won't be overheard and you won't be rushed. And you can just begin with the really simple question, how are you doing? Doesn't have to be fancy. It really can be asking, how are you doing? And really waiting for a response and really being prepared to listen to whatever it is they're going to share. They may say, I'm fine. They may try to kind of brush it off. You can follow up with something a little bit more specific. So you could say something like, you typically come to work early every day and you seem really engaged. But lately I've noticed you've been coming to work a little later and you seem kind of distracted, right? So we can share our observations, and then following that, we can say something like, how are you doing? Or I'm concerned. So really sharing something specific here can be helpful so they know that you are noticing them and that you're available to help them. It's not an accusation that they are not working hard. It really is, I'm concerned about you. Okay, so we want to make sure that that tone comes through clearly. If they do share, you can say, how can I support you? What can I do so that you feel supported at work? And so then you can engage in some brainstorming to figure out what will work for you. And then if the solution is that you're going to give someone additional time, or you're going to have a team member cover for them or do some checking for them, that team member may need to know or may want to know. And so if you do need to share with others on the team, make sure you discuss it with the person first, and to ask, what would you like the team to know? So if so-and-so is going to cover for you, what should I tell them? What would be helpful for them to know? And that way they know who knows, they know what they know, and they know why they know it. So that's a really important part of this conversation. Now, it is also possible that someone will say, I'm fine, when you ask how they're doing. And you'll share what you're observing, and they're still going to say, I'm fine, right? And that's their prerogative, right? Not everyone is open to sharing. It also could be they're just having a bad day or a bad week, right? But you've opened the door, you've started the conversation, and now they know you're interested, you're concerned, you're available. It can't hurt to follow up with them in a couple days or a week or a couple weeks. Sometimes it can take people a couple times of asking them and checking in before they're really comfortable opening up. Some people need that warm-up time. So it's worth asking. Sometimes you just may need to hang on there a little bit and they may eventually open up. Now, it's also important that we follow up when someone opens up with us. Confidentiality is, of course, really important. And we need to make sure that we are regularly checking in and letting them know that we are available to talk with them. We also need to remember that we are more than our diagnosis. If someone is experiencing depression, they are more than depression. They are still a person and they're a valued individual. Now, it's also important that we talk about suicide, and I just noticed the time, and so I need to kick it into high gear a little bit and also really emphasize the importance of talking about suicide. If we get that little bit of feeling that someone is thinking about killing themselves, we need to ask the question. We need to ask it clearly and directly. Are you thinking about killing yourself? It's a hard question to ask, but it's one of the most important questions we can ask. What it does is it tells the person, I see you, I'm concerned about you, and I want to help. What it does not do is give anyone any ideas. If someone is thinking about killing themselves, you asking the question is not going to push them into killing themselves. It's going to say, I see you, I'm here, I want to help you. So ask the question. If someone is actively thinking about suicide and hurting themselves, call 988, the National Suicide Prevention Lifeline. Stay with them. If you can't stay with them, find someone who can stay with them until help arrives. So that's one of the most important things we can do when it comes to talking about mental health. Now, I'm running short on time, as I mentioned. I hope you're also thinking about, as we talk about opening up about mental health, what you are doing to really take care of your own mental health. So if you are willing, please share with me in the chat, what do you do to care for your own mental health? How are you caring for yourself? Mental health is on a continuum. We kind of slide back and forth. And what do you do to ensure that you are feeling good and in a stable place? Here are some suggestions. We know more and more that our mental health is built upon our physical health, so it's important that we're eating, we're sleeping, and we're moving. These will help us to be physically strong and also mentally healthy, so we need to engage in these activities. Social support is really helpful, as well as managing our stress. Stress management is a skill. The more we practice it, the better we get at it. So these are some really great ways we know to support our mental health. Also, when we feel that we're sliding on that continuum and we're starting to have some mental health issues, it's important to seek professional care. Psychotherapy is incredibly helpful and evidence-based. Also, medication can be helpful, as well as coaching to really help us put our goals into action. Also, we have many resources available. You have your employee assistance program. We've got the 988 National Suicide Prevention Lifeline. Both of these services are confidential. And also consider all of the other ways you can support yourself in your mental health, and read some inspiring books, listen to some great podcasts and music, and watch some movies that really lift and inspire you. All right, so as I close this out, I hope you're thinking about where you're going to go from here. What are you going to be taking with you?
All right. Thank you so much, Jamie, for such an awesome presentation. So insightful. And thank you all for attending. But please don't go yet, because we have a brief survey as we have collaborated with FitMinded on evaluating these seminars. And I'll drop more information in the chat about them. When you complete the evaluation, though, you'll enter into a drawing for a free copy of Embrace the Possible by Dr. Edith Eger. Do you want to say like 30 seconds about that book, Jamie, that you recommended we give away?
Yes, I love Dr. Eger. I think she is wonderful and so inspirational. So I hope that whoever gets the book really enjoys it. It's a great one.
Fantastic. So please stick around for that survey. But first, please enjoy a preview of next month's webinar by Terry Walker on LGBTQIA+ mental health.
Hi there. Did you know that June is Pride Month and a time to celebrate diversity, promote awareness, understanding, and inclusivity? I'm excited to invite you to an essential training on LGBTQ plus mental health entitled Every Mind Matters, and it's happening on June 28th. In this training, we're going to explore unique mental health challenges faced by the LGBTQIA plus community, understand the risk factors, how to build resilience, along with understanding the critical role of allyship. Hi, I'm Terry J. Walker, international motivational speaker, corporate trainer, author, and coach. And I believe in the power of LNT, simply having the willingness to learn new things, because everyone brings a piece of the puzzle to the table, and everyone deserves to feel safe in their workplace, community, neighborhood, and yes, even in their home. So here's a bonus tip for you today. Practice kindness, be mindful, and educate yourself on LGBTQIA plus issues, because every step toward understanding helps build a stronger and more supportive community. Register now and join us on June 28th for this vital conversation. I can't wait to see you there.
All right, fantastic. Really looking forward to that. And thanks again, everyone. Please take the survey via QR code here, or I also placed the Google form in the chat. And you can keep up with Wendy and myself at podcast.show/BLI. We will be doing some Pride Month programming this month, and it's available wherever you stream podcasts. So until next time, everybody, take care, and thank you again to you, Jamie.
Take care, everyone.